Welcome to the Westport Library. Today's program will begin momentarily. Supported by Verso Studios, created locally and shared with the world.
Good evening. I'm Maggie Mudd, and it's my delight to welcome you to the Westport Library. Tonight's program is emblematic of what this library does so well, which is bringing thoughtful people together for meaningful conversation. Today is the publication day of Lightkeeper, a memoir through the lens of love and loss by Westport's own Stacy Waldman Bass. It is fitting that this event should take place here at the library, because with her myriad talents, Stacy always has and continues to play an instrumental role in supporting this community institution, which I think you'll agree is one of Westport's crown jewels. For all that you do for this library, Stacy, you deserve our admiration and at the very least, a round of applause. Well, this is a beautiful book that Stacy has written, using photos as a portal of discovery, rediscovery, and soulful rumination on the loss of cherished family. As Stacy herself has written, photography is my meditation, my prayer, my gift, and my offering. This is a brave and loving book that raises many topics, some difficult and painful. It is about acknowledging sorrows and grief, absorbing losses, and claiming the strength to carry on unconquered and grateful anew for all the joy on offer in the life that remains, awaiting. It scrutinizes subjects that beg to be discussed and brought out of the shadows, where some people reside, hobbled by misfortune and nursing their private agonies alone. You'll want to read this. To engage Stacy in a conversation about Lightkeeper, the library is honored to welcome back Dani Shapiro, the best-selling author of 11 books and the host and creator of the hit podcast Family Secrets. Her most recent novel, Signal Fires, was named a Best Book of 2022 by NPR, Time Magazine, Washington Post, Amazon, you name it. In 2019, Dani was here in conversation with author Jane Green, talking to a large crowd about her most recent memoir, Inheritance, which also was an instant New York Times bestseller and also named a Best Book of 2019 by many publications. Both Signal Fires and Inheritance were winners of the National Jewish Book Award. Dani's work has been published in 14 languages, and she is developing Signal Fires for its television adaptation. Recently, Dani's book on the process and craft of writing, still writing, has been reissued on the occasion of its 10th anniversary. Before Stacy became an accomplished and award-winning photographer, acclaimed for her distinctive images of American gardens, interiors, and architecture that are a part of many private and hotel collections, she was a lawyer working in the film business. That's where she met her husband, Howard Bass, and together they have 4 grown children and 4 grandchildren. 4 children and 4 grandchildren. She also is the author of 2 best-selling and beautiful monographs celebrating the American landscape, In the Garden, published in 2012, and Gardens at First Light, published in 2015, and an ebook called I Love You, Mom, which was given in thanks to donors to the Lustgarten Foundation, which fights pancreatic cancer. You'll be interested to know that Stacy took a memoir writing workshop with Dani, which helped Stacy envision this book. So Stacy and Dani, I invite you up. Thank you.
And here we are.
And here we are.
So before we start, if it's okay, I just wanted to, a couple of quick thank yous. First to Maggie for that beautiful introduction. It's always somewhat surreal to hear someone talking about you when you're just off stage. Thank you for those kind words. I really want to thank the library for being so important in my life. I realize that other than my home, this is probably the building in town that I've spent the most consecutive hours in over the last 30 years, so that seems important. I think number 3 might be terrain. I want to thank everyone at the library for their gracious hospitality, for welcoming me here today to do this very different thing than I normally do here. To Bill and Robin and Alex and Julie and Jennifer and Travis, you name it, all of them are terrific and, as you know, do incredible work here every day of the week. I also want to just thank this community. This is quite an overwhelming group of people. I know that I've seen my camp friends are here, grade school friends, high school friends, colleagues, clients, obviously my family. I'm so grateful that you're all here to share this experience with me today. It means so much. So with that, away we go.
Away we go.
Actually, importantly, sorry, I need to interrupt you. A final thank you, which I was going to do at the end, but I think I'll do now, to Dani. Because this particular thing is not something I ever dreamed about or envisioned, but once it started to come into view, it felt obvious to me that the person, if I could dream it, that I would want to do this thing with would be Dani Shapiro. From the first book of hers that I read, which was Slow Motion in 1998, and every single thing that's followed, as soon as it comes out, it becomes my instant favorite book. And I can't imagine being in better hands in this particular circumstance or someone whose work I admire as much as I do yours. So thank you for your generosity and for sharing the stage with me tonight.
Oh, Stacy, it's such a treat. And you know, that we actually met here when I was here doing my event for Inheritance with Jane Green. But we really met for real when you came to this retreat of mine. And so there's something so incredibly satisfying to me as someone who teaches to see the arc from there to here.
Sure.
And to then be sitting here with you and to have this beautiful book out in the world and fully realized as you all are going to have the treat of reading and seeing. So we're going to start tonight because I want Stacy's voice on the page needs to be part of this conversation. So I want to start by asking you to read from the preface, the foreword, very early in the book.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the second part of the preface, and hopefully I'll be able to actually see.
And do you want to say anything about the photograph that's behind us, or do you want to wait?
I think I'll wait.
Okay.
I guess maybe for context, each of the vignettes or chapters in the book starts with an image, and the intention, at least for me, was that the image was meant to be a portal into memory or a way of sort of a jumping off point for the writing that would follow. And this is from a series I did called Speak Memory many years ago, a compilation, a collage series that I did, which was something I really used to try to process my grief early on before I really did any writing about it. And it's called Long Road Home. Okay, I kind of can see. What you're about to read is the truth, my story, or at least a critically important and central part of it. I've mined my memory in an effort to both illuminate and hold tight to the essence that was my father, Michael Howard Waldman, and my mother, Jessica Friedman Waldman. This is my attempt at memorializing the unique and wholly spectacular relationships I was fortunate to have with each of them. This book is about love and also loss. It's about grief and growing. It's about what it means to be a daughter and a parent and to celebrate and elevate those relationships in your life. It's about the act of keeping the light, their light, and the light of family and legacy, what I call light keeping, if you will, and how there can be astonishing meaning and power in doing so. As an artist and photographer, I've looked inward and tried to harness my creativity to reimagine, diffuse, and process the still gripping grief I've carried since my dad died in a tragic accident in 1995. It's been an enormous challenge to manage the constant and unsettling aftershocks felt in my daily life. My 2008 photographic series, Speak Memory, explored the complexity, depth, and emotion of memory By juxtaposing color, text, slices of light, and stream of consciousness imagery, the body of work sought to expose personal history and truth and the dreamlike states they often take in one's mind. The saturation, depth, and luminance of memory reverberated through each layer and montage, offering the viewer a sense of hope and discovery. Similarly, when I embarked on writing this book more than 15 years ago, I was still searching for relief. For a long time, the writing was intermittent and inconsistent, but when the words came, they served their purpose, and mightily so. During those bursts of writing, I'd allow myself to dip back down into the depths of the missing and the longing. And then, several times a year, on birthdays or anniversaries, I'd sometimes share excerpts of my writing on social media. I found the reaction and support for that still raw and exposing expression to be staggeringly helpful. And so I continued to reveal my struggles, access my memories, and write my truth as it came to me, out of order, with no chronology, deeply felt but disconnected, clear as day, and also hard to discern, in shades of gray or sometimes in full-blown technicolor, unnerving, encouraging, long ago tucked away. So very beautiful, often inspired by a photograph rediscovered or by a brief evocative moment, scent, or taste that unlocked countless memories. Over time, and then with my mother's death in 2019, I began to see how essential and fortifying it can be to examine the world outside the frame of the images in my archives, both as a way of exploring and sometimes reconstituting my memories, and also very much as a way of cherishing, honoring, and shining light on my parents' lives.
Thank you. I find myself thinking about the complexity of the way that photographs and memory are for all of us. We look at a photograph and we think we remember. We remember and we wonder whether we're actually remembering or whether it's a photograph that we saw.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering for you in this journey, how you moved from, or what pushed you to move from photographs. I mean, you had already you were a photographer, to the kind of work that you just showed us in Speak Memory that actually feels like it's heading toward language.
Yeah.
When I just looked at it, that was the thought that I had, was that it's layered, it's narrative, even if we don't know the narrative.
Yeah.
And then into the project that you did, that you posted on Facebook, and then all the way to here. I know that's a big question, but talk us through that process.
Yeah, I think in the end, the photographs by themselves were falling slightly short of offering the solace that I needed. And that was when I sort of started to explore, really just to myself, writing in a journal, jotting something down. On the one anniversary of the accident, I went away by myself to a hotel with the intention of writing a letter to my father, obviously long gone at that point. And I discovered that the words were really offering something that the photographs on their own could not. And many years later, when my mom was diagnosed, after that first month of shuttling to doctors and sort of searching for the path forward, which I'm sure a lot of people have experienced what that's like, the sort of overwhelm of what that first month is like. At the end of that month, I felt not only lost and terrified about what was to follow, but I felt such an overwhelming need to try to offer something to the process while medicine did what it could. And I think, when I reached out to my mom and asked her what she thought about my doing this silly, strange sounding project where I would share a photo of her on Facebook with a sentence or two each day, she, as totally is consistent with her personality, she was focused on the logistics, how is this gonna work, and how long will it last, and she discussed it with Carl, her husband, and they came back to me and said, we think that you should try this. And I don't think that she really understood, and maybe I didn't either, what it could grow to be. The first day I shared a photo and I wrote several paragraphs because I felt I needed to give context to what I was attempting and what was the impetus for it. And then the second day I just posted a picture and I just wrote, "I love you, Mom," and the date, which was sort of how I started each of the posts. And people were immediately, "Say more." And I realized that people were looking for more language. They were looking for the nuance, beyond just the photo. And in the end, watching what happened over the course of that year in terms of how fortified she felt by the engagement that came, by the questions and the comments, and people, cheering her on when there was a particularly difficult day or milestone in her treatment coming up. And all of that was, it was a beautiful thing for me to see happen, which is more than I dreamed that it would be. And in the end, I discovered that I was sort of unintentionally writing a love letter to my mother that she got to read while she was here, which feels today still like such a gift that I gave to myself and I gave to her. And then later to learn that so many people whose circumstances were very different were taking lessons from that experience and reaching out to me offline to say, "This is helping me in my own relationships. This is helping me, deal with my own father who's ailing, or my friend, or whatever the circumstances were." And I think it was that combination that made me feel, if I'm still answering the question, I'm not totally sure, that was why it needed to not just be something that I kept to myself, and that if I could find a way to tell this story, even though it's very personal to my life and the circumstances of the tragic things that happened in it, that people would see themselves in it and be able to take something from it that could be helpful to them.
Listening to you, it strikes me that you lost each of your parents in completely different ways, and as did I, actually. You lost your father in an accident. It was sudden, it was shocking. You were young, it was horrible. And you lost your mother to pancreatic cancer, and you were grown, but that doesn't make it any less horrible.
Right.
And you knew it was coming, and it was this slow process. And I've often thought, there's no answer, and there's no good answer, but like which is, and I'm not asking you this question because there is no answer, but what strikes me about your I Love You, Mom project is that you got to do that while she was living. And that being an offering to her, as well as an offering to everyone. And that this book, which honors both of them, but is very, I think, a little bit more focused on your father, to my reading, is doing that honoring for your father now. It's like your I love you, Dad.
Yes.
And that's such a beautiful thing. I'm wondering when you had the sense. So I Love You, Mom. That happened.
Yeah.
And your mom passed, and this. You weren't done. You weren't done with this expression. And I'm curious how you find the difference between the finding the language, which is what you've done here, the going through the archives, your archives, and looking at these photographs and thinking, I think like one of the privileges of being a grown-up, if you get so lucky to do this, is to get to know your parents as human beings, who, and whether they're past or they're not, to get to know them as human beings who existed before they were your parents. And this book feels like such a dialogue with your parents and these beautiful young people that they were who you didn't know.
Yeah.
And so what was that whole process of grappling with that like? Because you can't do that in a photograph.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in that. I think I'll address a few things that you mentioned. Because of the circumstances of the accident, of course, there was no warning or opportunity to say goodbye. There was, thankfully, in my case, nothing left unsaid. There was no bad blood. There was no issues. My father and I had an incredibly close relationship. And yet, all of a sudden, this shattering that sort of scattered everything I knew. Over time, I remember once when the internet sort of became a little bit, when my father passed away, there was no cell phones, or maybe there were cell phones, but there were no phones in everybody's pocket. There were no iPhones. And at some point, I remember Googling him, and nothing came back except FAA reports or a couple of New York Times or Los Angeles Times or CNN reports about the accident. And I remember feeling so strongly like, this is who the world will remember him as unless I do something about that. There is no other evidence of this incredible life that he has lived and the people that he's impacted and touched and who he was as a human and not just as a person who died in a tragic way. So I think that's partly where the concept about late keeping sort of started to percolate, that it was my responsibility almost to do that. And other things, comparing which is worse, as you said, like they're both horrendous. But the lessons, I was able to learn lessons from the order that this happened. And one of the lessons, one of the most poignant things for me is that at some point I was so conscious that I was losing touch of my father's voice. I could hear the words he would use. I could imagine the words he would use in a certain circumstance and what his advice might be, but I couldn't actually hear the timbre quite anymore, and that started to really upset me, and I kind of went on a furious, reaching out to their closest friends. Does anybody have any video of Dad at a party or something? And nobody seemed to have anything, which I was disappointed about. And so when my mom was ill, I was super conscious about making sure I took the time to record her speaking and telling the stories that she'd shared before, and I knew many by heart, but in her own voice, with her own cadence, and doing that while not at the same time signaling to her that I was doing that because I thought the end was near. That was a very complicated thing, but she knew what was what, and I think she indulged me because it wasn't video, it was just audio, and therefore she could kind of get her head around it. And now to have her voice telling those stories in my pocket, which I can take out at any time and reconnect with that voice, is hugely, hugely important. And I say it because I feel like it's a lesson for other people. Don't wait till someone is ill. Now it's maybe not as big a deal because everyone has so much video and everyone has constant photos and all day long. But the intentionality behind it was really important, and I know that that's something that she has now left behind that I can share, that she can share with her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, and I feel like that's another form of late keeping that is part of my responsibility to do. Did I answer your question?
Yes. What was the process like of this? I mean, this book is like a pastiche of these images that are, some of them are yours and some of them are archival, family photos.
Yeah.
What was the process of shuffling through those photos and saying this one, and the spark of that? If you can define it, what was the impetus for each one of the pieces that you wrote? Because undoubtedly you had way more photos than you included in the book.
Of course.
Yeah.
There are 60 photos in the book, and I think I probably took maybe 10 of them. Many I don't know the photographer, many were taken by my father, many that I have in my possession but that are not all in the book were taken by Bob Silverstone, who was an incredible chronicler of their time together, my parents' closest friends, Bob and Harriet. So every one of those images means so much to me, and I hold on to them for dear life. In some cases, I would say, sometimes it was the writing that came first, or there was a story that came to mind, and I started to look for a photo that represented it. The pictures in the book are not necessarily the best photos in any way, and they're not necessarily the most well-composed photos, but there's something about them that really just connected me to the memory. And interestingly, one of the photos in the book that I think they'll show it later, is one of the ones that was most moving to me. Is a photo I found when I was just sort of accidentally looking for something totally unrelated and discovered this slide with my loop kind of on my desk, and all of a sudden there was this photo that I must have been there, obviously, and I had just never noticed it, and it was my mother lying in a bed taken by my father on their honeymoon. I surmised it was their honeymoon in Puerto Rico, and not only is it a beautifully, beautifully composed photo and has great mid-century modern feel, but my mother was so radiant. Like, she was always beautiful, but there was something about this picture and seeing her before I was me that really made me want to dive in more. You know, what was going on? What were they just got married. What was that all about? Were they feeling nervous about going back to their life, their new life as a married couple? What were some of the things they were talking about at that time? Were they wanting to have kids right away, which they did? All of those things that when you see an image like that, you wonder, is access to an intimate moment that, in some ways I shouldn't have been privy to. But to see it in this context all of those years later just felt, I literally screamed out loud. I was so happy. I printed it immediately. I look at it all the time. It's hanging in my house. And it just, as images I think everyone knows can do, just bring you right back to that person or whatever it evokes, in this case, the kindness and sweetness of my mom.
I think this is actually a perfect moment for us to see that photograph.
Oh, okay.
And for you to read.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
And this is a little, a short piece called Fireflies.
Actually, we were going to do this one for photographs, but it doesn't really matter.
Oh, we were? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'll read photographs.
Okay.
Thank you. I have all of the pictures. The ones that are in the now dusty Kodak carousel wheel, the ones in the peel-back sticky magnetic page albums, the square snapshots with the aging white borders, the shiny prints, the matte prints, the ones from which I cut away all the negative space so as to not waste valuable inches on the scrapbook page. I have the ones I acquired when Mom cleaned out a closet or when a stray box was recovered in an old office. And more recently, I have scans and scans of slides and plastic binder pages. Of course, I now have all the digital images too. Downloaded from cameras, uploaded from iPhones, emailed and texted and Dropboxed and file shared, all of them. I hold on to them with the tightest of grips, afraid to let go, and at the same time with the tenderest, most loving caress, gently brushing on the outer edges of those moments now past. For a time, I had organized prints by category, by trip, or chronologically. These were filed away in white envelopes in whimsically patterned photo boxes from the now defunct Light Impressions catalog that I used to love. Photographs and organization, double bliss. But eventually, there were just too many of those boxes. Their mismatched colors and patterns set me on edge. I managed to purge the images that weren't worth saving and consolidate the rest into larger boxes marked simply as photos or memorabilia. This was quite off-brand for me. I stopped worrying about the commingling of trips and times, of people and places. I actually leaned into the disarray. Just yesterday, I came to the realization about the heretofore unrecognized method behind that madness. It felt good. Having all those moments swimming around together, face to face, back to back, completely non-chronological and disorganized and messy, felt like the perfect mirror to my memory all of a sudden. The free association between them felt unbounded and unconfined. There was no telling what memory or which image would come to mind and when. The timeline of their creation no longer mattered. Instead, they floated around as if suspended in a transparent, viscous fluid, organically shifting, moving, and transposing until my attention stumbled upon one, and then maybe another, plucking them back into consciousness. And then, for a fleeting moment, they got to live again.
You can clap.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's something about this fleetingness of being able to live again, and through the photographs that had existed before you were ever born, and the imagination of the daughter, coming in, and this is something only writing can do, only literature can do. I'm wondering whether you feel, I'm sorry, I ask long, meandering questions. It's just
I like
my way. There's meaning making here. And the making of meaning, we've come to understand in terms of grief, in terms of trauma, is kind of all we get, right? It's like if we're lucky to be able to make meaning out of something that is chaotic and painful and hard. And this project of yours is a long-term project.
Yeah.
It's kind of a lifelong project with many other detours along the way to other kinds of work that you've done that interestingly are often very beautiful, very pristine, very elegant, very, just aesthetically pleasing, right? And then, and organized.
Yeah.
And then there is this, which is not organized, the chaos of grief, the fact that it never ends, that it's kind of, grief is a lifelong project.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not exactly a question, but I just wonder if you could talk about that a little bit. And I guess the way that the writing of it and these pieces that range from very brief to narrative and longer, dance with, play with these images to create something that feels complete for you.
Yeah. I think that, there's a lot of literature, and I don't profess to be a psychologist or a professional or someone who is even well-read necessarily about grief, at least technically speaking. But it became really obvious to me pretty early on that I was never getting over this. And I think there, people talk about the stages of grief, and you go through the stages, and then at the end, you're fine. But of course, that isn't reality. And I think that at some point I realized, almost defiantly, I don't want to get over this. This is something that happened to me and has changed everything. And I want to think about my parents every day. I want to do my best to honor them with how I'm living my life, to remember them myself and to other people. And I think there's a lot of freedom in allowing yourself to not get over it, not feel like I'm not over this yet. And I think once I allowed myself to do that, it made more space to focus on how to kind of hold it in my body in a different way so that I could lean into living and lean into, like you mentioned, seeing the beautiful, seeking out the beautiful, sharing the beautiful with other people if I experienced it. being able to have joy, to have relationships that are meaningful and not marred by, being stunted by something that happened. And I think that the coexisting of those things has been sort of, and I guess always will be, a lifelong goal of how to hold both of those things together. In the end, I think it was the combination of the writing that coincided with doing EMDR trauma therapy, which I don't know if everyone knows, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. And while I don't know that I was doing it right, I'm not even sure what that looks like, the combination of that process, which coincided with the last couple of years of doing the writing, I think somehow was the perfect chemistry to allowing me to feel really differently. Not over anything, but feeling the container that I created to put this is just in a different place in my body, and it's not sapping the energy of a lot of the other things that coexist. And I think that my close friends, and certainly Howie, would say that he sees the difference, that there is something different. I feel it too. And being able to do that, being able to write this has certainly been cathartic in many ways. Speaking about it now, as I'm starting to do tonight, and as I've been doing on some podcasts the last couple of weeks, is a new thing. And I'm sort of amazed that I'm not crying right now. Like I'm somehow able to hold the things at the same time, as much as I still feel every bit of it just under the surface. It's 30 years, just a couple of weeks ago, it was 30 years since the accident, which, boggles my mind. But I can recreate the emotion of that day in an instant. It's so close, and yet I'm out in the world and functioning and seeing joy, experiencing it, and being able to hold both at the same time.
It's so interesting that you bring up EMDR, which some people in the audience I'm sure know and some don't. But I think one of the hallmarks of it is that it doesn't take it away. There's no cure for grief or trauma, or the Venn diagram in which those both kind of exist. But it allows you to metabolize it so that it's not repeating itself over and over again as the feeling that it was when it first happened, which then allows for other light to flood in.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'd love for you to talk about, and I found very moving in your book, is your whole life would have been different if this accident hadn't happened. You were married to somebody else. Obviously, you hadn't met Howie yet. You were on a path. Who knows where that path would have gone? But it probably wouldn't have gone where it did, because as there's a line in my last novel, which is, change one thing and everything changes. Always. Just change one thing. Turn left, turn right, walk in the door, don't walk in the door, go to the party, don't go to the party. Have a tragedy happen that wakes you up and makes you think no about something.
Yeah.
Your life changed, and this is such a confusing thing, right? Your life changed radically for the better in the aftermath of this horrific accident, because that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And does that make sense? And where do you put that? How do you hold that? And I imagine you very much wish that your father could have known Howie, and that that he could have known your kids, and yet,
Of course.
and yet it's a piece of what happened that you can't disrupt that narrative and have the same narrative.
So to set the record straight, my dad did know Howie. Howie and I were colleagues at the time, each married to someone else. And my dad came to visit me at work one day, I think to take me to lunch. And I remember he was dressed in his typical non-fancy clothes, and probably a cowboy hat or something slightly inappropriate for New York City. And I remember after he said hello to Howie, who was in his office, and later on, I came back in and Howie said to me, "I want to be him when I grow up." And they had met for less than a minute. But I take a lot of joy in knowing that their hands touched and they were connected even for a split second, even though Howie and I were not Howie and I until long, long after that. I think that one of the things that happened, well, two ways of answering what you asked, I think. The first thing is that it's hard as you know, in the aftermath of an accident to not think about the what ifs. You know, I've often thought that if that had happened today, if those circumstances were today, everybody has a phone and texts constantly. I know that my father would have texted to say, instead of coming straight home, we're gonna stop in Block Island for lunch. And then I know I would have said, don't do that. You should come home because it's Anne's birthday. There's all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't extend the day, but that was never an opportunity. There was no communication. So there's that horrible feeling of the if only, which, you know, maybe it wouldn't have changed anything, who knows. So there's that piece that I carry around with me at the what ifs. The other thing that I sometimes grapple with, which is very hard and emotional, is that, you know, maybe there was something, like I wasn't going to be able to be with Howie and have the relationship that we have if my father was still here. Maybe that's wrong. But my father was, you know, a larger than life presence, and he was in my head all the time. And if he expressed disapproval, it was super hard for me to go forward with something that he didn't think was a good idea. And while that's such a sad thing to think that they couldn't both be in my life, it's almost like he made space for that in this thing that he, you know, obviously didn't intend to happen. And it's hard to not feel gratitude for that incredible thing that happened in the chain of events, like change one thing, change it all. I think right after the accident, you know, it was a time where I had to rediscover who I was, you know, what I actually wanted. It's a lesson that no one wants to learn ever, but learning it at 28 at a very sort of pivotal time in your life and realizing, wow, I understand now what it means to say that life is short. Like this is not, I'm not on the right path, and it's time to change that. And I think that it's almost like the universe gave me permission to do it. Whereas under another circumstance, it might have taken years to unravel the marriage and move on. Everything was sort of accelerated because the universe kind of made this safe space for me to make that decision and change my life. Mm. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And we're going to have to move to questions in a minute, but yeah. It strikes me that we are, like, here we are in Westport, and it's this place that you grew up in, that, you know, that your family has these deep roots in, that yeah. That you have these deep roots in now. That there's a beautiful passage in the book that I'm sure you'll all read about you and Howie about to get married. You know, finding this property in Westport and being like, just must live here.
Right.
The grounding. I mean, it's kind of extraordinary in 2025 in this life that we all live that is so peripatetic, and people are, you know, people don't tend to have roots and stay there and kind of dig in. And there's just something incredibly meaningful. I had chills at the very beginning of your reading when you named both of your parents. because it was like a Kaddish for them.
Yeah, for sure.
To say their names in this place, in this, like on this land, essentially, that they lived on and that you live on.
Yeah. It's very, the intentionality, like living every day in a place where I'm looking at where their ashes are scattered. It's in my view every day. The house that they lived in, all of those things, it's certainly not an accident that we ended up there, but it's sort of essential to who I am. And I think I've said before, like Westport has been home since I'm 4. And, with the exception of a few years in between for college and law school, et cetera. But to be in this place where I didn't feel the push that you would feel if you were a young couple moving to a new community and you didn't know anybody and you needed to make friends and figure out kind of where you fit in. I never felt that. I felt like this is my home. I don't need to find where I fit. I fit. And I think that the pressure taken off of that was something that really helped with the healing. I say in the book that, on our daily walk, we stop at what was my parents' house and talk to them. Howie and I do it together. He does it on his own. I do it on my own. It's such an important ritual of staying connected. And like you said, there's something about the energy in that particular latitude and longitude that is connected to them. And since they aren't here, that's kind of where their spirit is living for me.
That's beautiful. Should we end with you reading Fireflies now?
If you like.
Sorry about that. Yes, please.
Thank you. This is a very short passage. Fireflies. There are some days that I have to fight like hell to capture a memory. With patience and determination, I set out. I can see it. At first opaque and seemingly just out of reach, I try to collect it and hold it tight. This process of remembering is like trying to catch fireflies, something I recall doing in the field outside our bunks at Birchmont or in the backyard at North Avenue on an especially warm summer evening. I take a big glass ball jar in one hand, its metal lid in the other, and stalk the fireflies quietly with intense focus on a starry night. Memories, like fireflies, are everywhere and nowhere all at once, dotting the field around me like constellations. Patterns emerge and then fade. Distance and perspective morph. First, it seems one is hovering right before my eyes. It starts to glow, but then, in milliseconds, the light disappears. It vanishes in a shadow. It takes the memory along with it.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
So good evening. We have time for a few questions for Stacy about her book or her writing practice. So we ask that if you please line up along here, and when you come to the mic, if you could limit your questions to one each so that we can get to as many people as possible. Thank you. And you're welcome to come to the mic now.
Or also not.
Somebody has to be first.
Sure.
Yeah. We're asking if people could come to the mic so that everyone can hear and so that it can be on the recording. Thank you.
Hi.
So that beautiful photo of your mother on the bed, can you think of a photo of yourself that was taken before you were a mom that would you like your kids to kind of unearth or discover and find something new about you?
Oh, gosh. That's such a great question, Eileen. Interestingly, that photo, my friend Louisa says, looks exactly like me. So maybe that one. But otherwise, honestly, nothing comes to mind right now. I'll have to, now you're gonna send me on a search for finding that image and sort of tag it so the kids can find it one day. I'll think about it. Thank you for asking that. You guys are awfully shy. Okay. Oh, someone.
Hello.
Hi.
What would you like your children to write about you?
Oh, boy.
I'm going to go sit down now.
What would I like my children to write about me? Maybe you should ask my children who are sitting in the front row. I guess what I would say is I hope that they will share the stories of my life that I've shared with them, maybe not in the same format as I have about my parents, but that they will do that with their own kids going forward. Hi.
Hi, friend.
Hi.
Stacy, I'm curious how you, all these old photos, I mean, you have such a gift of photography, but these, like the one that was of your mom, who took that, like the composition?
I know, isn't that
And this
great?
one, I know Bob and Harriet probably took a great majority of them, but they're so classic. So did your dad have that?
Yeah, my dad, as I've said before,
don't remember that.
He was a photographer. I wouldn't say he considered himself a serious photographer, but he loved the trappings of photography. He had lots of cameras and lenses and liked to collect them. And I never really associated any particular images with like his gift or his eye, but that photo was definitely taken by him on their honeymoon. And there are several others of my mom in particular that just have, you know, the gaze is unmistakable. So yeah, he really did have a gift.
Were they all just prints that you found? Like, how did you get this incredible quality? I mean, I've got millions of prints that don't look like that.
Well, Polly. That picture was actually a slide. He mostly shot on Ektachrome, Kodachrome slide film, and I scanned them at different resolutions. Sometimes I'll take, you know, during the I Love You Mom project, very often those photos were actually prints that I just had in a box, and I took a photo with my iPhone, which is strangely very high resolution, and you can really get a very good print with that often.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Did your father take the one that's in the book of your mother on the diving board on the boat from behind? Yeah.
Actually,
who else could have taken that?
To tell you the truth, that could have been Bob. Bob, did you take that photo of Mom without her bikini top on? Yes. See that?
All right,
when
then.
You said it could only have been my dad, it could have been Bob. Yes, there. As I describe in the book, the boat trips that they did together were pretty incredible fodder for great photography, and I think the friendship really comes through in all of those images as well. Yes. Hi.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I wanted to just say that this really resonates with me because I had a similar situation where both of my parents were gone by the time I was 18. And hearing you talk about processing grief so that it doesn't stop the joy of the current situation is very inspiring and something that I still have to work on. I can hear from what you're saying, I need to work on that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm this age that I'm at, this should be gone already. And it's not. So I just want to thank you for your honesty, and it was very insightful. It makes me think. It just happened to be looking through pictures last week because they wanted to make a book for my sister. And I'm like, well, there's my mom when I'm a baby, and and it's upsetting, but at the same time, it's joyful.
Yeah. Well, that's what you're doing. You're light keeping, and making that book for your sister is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, it looks like we're going to transition to the book signing phase. So thank you all for coming tonight. And if you'd like to stay. Thank you. We just ask you folks to line up going toward the stage, and Stacy will be signing. Thank you. The line will go this way.